More on Florida now, because the race for the White House is hotting up with both President Obama and the Republican candidate Mitt Romney talking tough on the economy in recent days. The latest polls currently showing that President Obama is fractionally ahead of his rival with 47 points to 44, though it's been in flux for some while. There are 9 states that could go, potentially at least, either way. One of those states is Florida, where the Republican convention kicks off tomorrow. Let's get some thoughts on this one. Let's speak to Rogan, member of Republicans Abroad, and Dr. James D. Boys, Senior Research Fellow and US Political Expert at King's College London. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Thanks for coming in. How nice it was to be able to literally talk about storm clouds gathering over Florida. I mean it literally, because it's interfered with things. Tom, you were telling us your dad's down there.
My dad is about an hour and a half south, and he said it's not too bad. Americans are kind of unnecessarily freaking out, but I think there is an understanding that when you have that many people coming in for a big political event, you have to be careful. And so I think it was the appropriate choice for the convention to be delayed for a day. Just play it safe. We're still going to have time to be able to present the message, but you don't want to take risk when, there's risk.
OK. James, it's interesting that Tom uses the phrase present the message, because that's what the National Convention is nowadays, isn't it? I mean, it's all become a cliché of politics.
It's what it's become. It didn't used to be, of course, the whole idea of a convention where the delegates together and decide who the nominee was going to be. We knew who that was going to be months ago. So one of the problems you have for these organisers is how to keep people interested in this. So it's actually done them a lot of good. There were people scrambling around. The US networks were talking about not carrying Monday's feed. So people were worried about Ann Romney not getting a speaking position. So actually, by truncating the event slightly, it's probably actually done the Republicans some good, I think.
Yeah. Tom, talk to us about Paul Ryan. Yeah. Because you get the feeling that his appointment to the candidature of vice president as this, dry, smart, fit, early 40-something, intellectual powerhouse, libertarian but Catholic. Does that go together? You know what I mean? But he's excited the base, hasn't he?
He has, and I think there are understandable reasons for that. I think he's excited people across the board because on the one side, the Tea Party element who are very concerned about fiscal conservative issues. He is one of the few people in American politics who's really gone bold and talk about Medicare, Social Security, which James will agree with me has always been the third rail of American politics. He's been bold on that. And at the same time, for people like me who were disappointed with the 2008 VP selection, Sarah Palin, I think he represents a much clearer alternative to that, someone who, as you say, is very intellectually robust and I think can bring a degree of, higher talk to the campaign, which it needs.
Yeah. I mean, James, we're not going to do any Sarah Palin bashing. We don't need to do that. But, I mean, Paul Ryan is clearly a man of some intellectual weight and stature. But does he transform the Republican prospects, really?
I think what he does is he guarantees, hopefully, that the base of the Republican Party, the Tea Party wing, if we can call them that, will come out. There's no doubt that Mitt Romney was not the Tea Party candidate for the Republican Party. Paul Ryan will help do that, but he could also energise the Democratic base as well, because what you've got is someone who is intellectual, he's got his statements out there, as Tom rightly pointed out, but that also gives a target for the Democrats to go after and say, look, is the bottom of the ticket dictating policy to the top of the ticket? And especially in Florida, where you've got a lot of elderly citizens who could be under threat from
Paul Ryan's been trotting at his mum, hasn't he? His dear old mum, to try and neutralise some of these attack ads.
The interesting thing is, I think, actually, there's not a big risk here, because all Paul Ryan needs to do is to go down to Florida and say, listen, if you're 55 or older, nothing's changing. But if you're under 55, we're addressing a plan now that will give you solvency into the future. The Democrats don't have a plan. President Obama has proposed nothing. He's just saying, well, I'm going to protect Medicare, but he's cut $700 billion of it with his health care reform. And now he's going to allow Medicare essentially just to evaporate in the future because it's fiscally, fundamentally, is not solvent. So you face a situation where there is a gap in terms of revenue and what you're expected to spend. How do you address that? And Ryan and Romney are proposing a plan. Obama's not.
James, who's in charge of the GOP, the Grand Old Party, these days? I mean, has the high water mark been reached and left behind by the Tea Party movement? Have the more centrist mainstream Republicans got back control of the tiller? Who's bossing things?
I think it fluctuates, and I'd be interested to get Tom's thoughts on this, but you get the idea that earlier in the cycle, around sort of 2010, the Tea Party were very much in the ascendancy. With the nomination of Romney, that seemed to disappear a little bit, but by moving back and bringing Ryan in, I think. There's no doubt about it that there's a recognition that the Tea Party are a very important part of the party, and if you ignore them, you do so at your peril, because there's nothing more important than getting an election victory, which is what they desperately need this electoral cycle.
Tom, I've got to ask you about this. Nothing irritates Republicans abroad more than the sort of what they see as the sort of Republicans being mischaracterised in a certain way. But what did you make of all those, quote, gaffes that Mitt Romney was alleged to have made on his tour of Europe and elsewhere?
Well, you know, let's say it wasn't ideal in some ways, but I think a lot of those things were mischaracterized. I mean, the big one, when Mitt Romney was in Poland, the US press corps was screaming at the Polish Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. You know, that's not acceptable. And I think, you know, the Romney press secretary got upset about that. You know, okay, it's not ideal, but I think Mitt Romney, compared to the president, is someone who is just going to say what he thinks. And I personally, okay, I'm a Republican, but I've been really disappointed with Obama in the sense that, you know, he says that he's going to do one thing, but there really isn't. He said he was going to change the tone of Washington. The partisan tone in Washington has never been worse.
Listen, I'm not going to ask you whether you think your man can win.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you whether he will win.
He will win. I think he will win. And I think when you see the convention this week and you see Mitt Romney address the American people about the economy, about the debt, about healthcare, you are going to see a clear contrast with the president, who talks, or used to talk, a great game. I don't think he talks a great game even anymore, but he hasn't achieved. And I think there's going to be a clear alternative.
OK, Tom Rogan, James Boyce, thanks both very much indeed.